Welcome, everybody. Glad you could take a little bit of time with me today. Hopefully, I can bring some value to your day. Guess just to start off, can you guys see my screen okay? We're good?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Out of curiosity here, how many of you guys, before we get rolling, are working more than 50 hours a week? Give me a one in the chat if you're one of those guys working more than 50 hours a week. Yeah, okay. All right, so today's discussion, and again, most contractors, especially when they're starting out, tend to think that we can outwork bad systems or bad processes, right? Most contractor thinks more hours will equal more success, and that couldn't be further from the truth. I wonder how many of you guys have had the thought that if you just work a little harder, you'll be able to get ahead. So unfortunately, this particular mindset comes from being really good at the trades, and it generally keeps us pretty stuck in that hard grind. And as you're scaling and growing a business and wearing multiple hats, it compounds. All right. So more hours actually often means more chaos. And I'm going to try and put this all into perspective for you guys today. And maybe you can relate to some of the things that you may be experiencing in your own business. So apparently 72% of US contractors report working over 60 hours a week. All right. So again, you certainly wouldn't be unusual if you are working over 60 hours. I can certainly remember the days of 80, 90-hour work weeks. And the conclusion that you come to is that ultimately, again, that does not get your business further ahead. Even for a little while, it actually creates more chaos. And we're going to go through why. All right. So first of all, overworked actually means that we have bottlenecks. All right. Why is it only you in your business that, is forced to work these hours? And a lot of times we are unfortunately in a state of anxiety on top of that in running a business. And unfortunately, in the state of anxiety, if we're overworked and stressed, all right, what it leads to is burnout. Second thing it leads to is nothing new or creative can be done. All right. Of anybody that's trying to grow a business in the state of anxiety, all right, in high anxiety and high stress, they're at risk of burning out, but also they're not able to actually solve their problems. All right. Unfortunately, when it's a chemical reaction in our body doesn't know the difference. And I don't know how many of you guys can work 60, 70 hours and perhaps build systems into your business. If you are that guy, feel free to put up your hand and I'll shake it for you. Okay. So again, a lot of this comes back to feeling stuck, right? So why are you really stuck? And maybe it's not enough systems. Most of the time, we sometimes contribute it to not having the right guys or not having the right resources. And to the most part, it can be true. But I often use the question like, what if you had all of those things? Would your problems go away? So let's say you had the dream team, but no systems, right? Would your business grow? Okay, so most contractors do everything themselves, calls, quotes, site visits. They have no clear processes and they're constantly putting out fires. The business is built around you, not a system. So you are the product. All right. And I try to get owners to understand this as quickly as you can because it helps to, again, get back your time. The first place we always need to be focused on is our personal time and our time and how much we're contributing to the business through time. Okay. And the reason for that is, again, it's going to determine if you actually have a business or not. If you are the product, all right, that's not a business. Okay. So if everything falls down when you're not there, all right, again, not a business. All right. You've got a very stressful job. All right. So let's start thinking of some of the bottlenecks and the traps that keep us working these long hours in high risk situations. So when you're the only decision maker, jobs stall when you're busy, right? So if your team is coming back to you to make every decision, that's a clear sign that you have a systems problem. Okay. Subcontractors and crews wait for your input, right? So you've made yourself the rake in your business. Everything flows up to you. Okay. And unfortunately, again, a lot of owners I find at certain stages are micromanagers and they design it that way. And what I see most often is that's where the biggest mistakes actually occur, right? So we see huge quality drops, lots of callbacks, slow payments, the list goes on when we have a owner that has created a rake in their business, right? So 54% of contractors say they are the main bottleneck. So again, out of curiosity, if anybody here already knows they're the bottleneck in their business, give me a big old one in the chat. Let me know you're here so I can focus on you and getting you out of that trap. Okay. So where do we start to get back our time? Where do we start when we know we're the bottleneck in our business? When we know that our business can't survive much past a week or a few days without us? Where do we actually start to look to remove this problem? So again, I always start with the lowest hanging fruit. All right. We need to actually be a specialist. Okay. And this applies to general contractors. I don't care, what kind of business you're operating in. There's areas where we are extremely good and areas that we should not be offering our services. Okay. So again, focus on your best services, less chaos, more profit. You're just removing variables. Okay. So if you're still a contractor that is living in scarcity and has to offer everything under the sun, and we all know those guys, the guy that does everything. Okay. And this applies again to general contractors. We really need to start to break that mindset. All right. And picking a few things that we're extremely good at and have an unfair advantage in the market when doing. All right. Otherwise, you're always going to be a commoditized. So trying to do everything spreads you thin. All right. And it's very simple to understand. The more variables that you add to your business, the more variables you add into your services, okay, the harder it is to scale. The harder it is to get beyond the business relying on you entirely. And it requires all of your attention. So again, if we're taking on jobs that we're the only ones that are skilled enough to actually perform, all right, we need to really take a deep look at that and start to scale that back where we're choosing jobs that we can get others to do easier. All right. So contractors that specialize earn 22% higher margins. Okay. Now, how would this apply to a general contractor? All right. So a general contractor can pick their zone. So, you can be a general contractor that's offering mid-market services. All right. Maybe it's kitchens, bathrooms. All right. And mid-market. All right. That's not the same general contractor that's offering ultra high-end services. Those are two different variables. So this is what I mean by specializing, picking your customer, right? Understanding and trying to deal with the same type of customer over and over again helps to remove variables. Okay. And there's a million other examples. All right. So hopefully you're thinking about your own business and we can all use this from time to time and really becoming a specialist within our own niche. Okay. So we want to streamline our workflow, right? So a step by step. And we're talking about processes here. A lot of guys, again, understand that they need systems in their business, but dramatically overthink, all right, how complex they need to be. Okay. What I see most often is we just make it too damn hard. All right. Systems are supposed to help you, not make things more difficult. All right. So today we're going to try and make sure that you're leaving here with solid, easy to follow things that you can implement today. So everyone that's on this call and on the stream, I want you to think about what actions you can make because just showing up for the information, that's a waste of your time and certainly not what I want to see here. I want you to think about what action steps you can take, all right, and how you can start to make small changes today, imperfect action, all right, to start to get yourself into a better situation. So let's go step by step. The first thing is we need to list every task that you're doing in a week. All right. We sometimes call this the time audit. All right. I don't care how you do it. If you want to write it on a napkin, so be it. But most of us do a lot of work subconsciously. We just do things. We don't realize how many calls we're taking or what our time is really going into. All right. When you start to track your time, it only takes about 2 weeks and you would be shocked at what you find. I do timeouts myself. All my clients do as well because things, can somehow end up in your schedule that you just should not be doing. You want to think like a CEO. You want to think like a upper end manager. All right. If you are doing $20 an hour tasks, all right, things like admin work, stuff like that, those are the places we need to start to systemize or delegate. Okay. So once you have this, highlight what you only can do. Okay. Again, what should you only be doing? So if you've got admin on your task list, you're answering phones and sending invoices and doing admin work, although important, all right, that's definitely something that we need to highlight because we're going to delegate, right? Either through a system or improving the process or a person that you can fully delegate to, right? So the third thing is we're going to delegate or automate the rest. Okay. So again, the things that you should be doing, all right, those could be $1,000 an hour tasks. Things like sales, right? Being in front of a customer and closing a deal, right? That's $1,000 or more an hour. All right. If we spent more time in those situations, all right, your business is going to grow. Your profits are going to grow. All right. And if we spent less time in non-sales activity, for example, all right, where most of those tasks can be $20, $30 an hour, all right, you would find that ultimately your profits would grow again, right? We got to get rid of those things. Again, other examples of this is using templates for quotes, not handwriting every single quote. And hopefully there's no one on here that's still doing that, but if you are, again, this is for you, right? Invoices and job checklists, simple things, guys. If you can't do the simple things, it's very hard to bring in more complex systems. And like I said, what I see most contractors do is go immediately for a complex system, all right, where they haven't even mastered the very basic things of managing their time. And then ultimately that chaos follows them directly into that system and it never gets set up properly. They never utilize it. Therefore, they never receive the benefits of having a good system. So it's like having a Mercedes Benz in your driveway with no tires. Okay. So what do top contractors do differently? Anybody ever wondered how some contractors just manage to grow 2, 3 times every year? Just wonder how they got to those huge numbers and are so organized. So top 10% of contractors work 40 to 50 hours a week, not 80. And I would say they work even less than that. Again, you can have a fairly successful business. I myself have a few businesses and I work very little in them. If I work 4 hours a month, that's more than I probably should. Okay, so again, when you're thinking about your business, I'm giving you the exact formula that I had to go through, although it took me a very long time and lots of trial and error, and hopefully you guys can skip that. But it's ultimately being accountable to your time, number one, and removing yourself from the processes that you either systemize, automate, delegate away. Okay. So one of the big things that you will always find is that they have clear roles and systems tied to those roles. And they use tech. Yes, they use tech, but don't forget the first part of it. All right. Most of us make the fundamental mistake of hiring a person, all right? Hiring somebody we think that could help our business, all right? Based on what they perceive as their skills, and then trying to fit a role around that person. I say that's the fundamental mistake that I see most often, all right? And it very rarely works out. What we have to do first is have a clear role, all right? Be it a project manager, be it an admin, okay? And define that role, right? Understand what the tasks are that have to be completed. And again, taking things off of your plate and putting them into those roles. Understanding what exactly needs to be done, what those tasks look like. Delegating, okay? Getting them off your plate. When you can do that, now we can systemize and we can actually find a person that fits the role. They can fit the role and you're not constantly having to reinvent the wheel or train them to do something that they're not qualified or can't do, period. All right. I see this a lot when we hire family members. I don't know if anyone's had that experience. I know I certainly have, where you see all the hope and possibilities in them and then put them into a role that they are completely unskilled or don't perform well. Okay. So 81% of high profit contractors use job management software. Now, being a consultant and somebody that installs these systems day in and day out with our team, I can say without a shadow of a doubt that of that 81%, maybe 10% fully utilize it. And that's a shame because they never get the full benefit out of these systems. And a lot of times they're hooked in with bells and whistles, all right? They're hooked in with shiny objects, but they never fully utilize their systems, okay? Again, I'm sure you guys can all relate if anyone here has built a CRM or if anybody's had job management software, okay, that they never fully integrated, had great thoughts of, or plans for, but never actually used it to its full potential. I would say that's the majority of contractors out there. Okay. So, one of the interesting things that always occurs when we start to get back control of our time, when we start to get focused on systems, when we start to make simple things within our business where we're able to delegate, okay? The first place we can measure that is profit margin, okay? So again, when we work sometimes less hours, so slowing down to speed up, right? And we focus on things that allow us to buy back our time in systems, the first place it's going to reflect is in your profit margin. Okay. Letting go of some of these tasks, some of these things that you feel are necessary to save money at a certain point, or that you haven't been able to get anybody to do well or as good as you, all right, often is reflected in how much money you earn. Okay. So again, it's a mindset, it's an understanding, it's something that we need to all be very clear about, right? Scaling by systemizing, right? So again, I can give you a million examples of this, all right? It doesn't have to be complicated, it doesn't have to be complex or hard to understand. In fact, the best systems that contractors use and that stick the longest are the simplest. Okay? A good example of this is a checklist, a pre-production checklist. All right, where a job starts up the same way every single time, following the same steps. Okay. Again, I do some pre-production checklists in my own personal business. We have 143 different checklist items. Okay. I don't know about you guys, but I can't memorize 143 things and remember it on every single job. How many of you guys think you could? Or better, how many of you guys would like to hire a PM but don't have this checklist? What would he have to be to basically cover all those variables? Okay? Another very easy place to start to implement systems is hire a part-time admin. Just handles the calls and the paperwork. All right? Think about all the jobs that you're doing, all right, or that you potentially doing, or maybe your managers are doing. Okay? When you start to really look carefully at those, we want to understand, is this something that can be delegated? Okay? So we can take simple things like a pre-production checklist, and we have a lot of case studies where we've seen 30 to 40% improvement in productivity. All right, 30 to 40% by adding a pre-production process in place. All right. And it's a matter of fact that almost 90% of the problems that happen or occur in the field are a direct result of pre-production failure. So sales to production failure. Okay. And usually what it means is that we don't have a repeatable, easy to understand system in place where anybody can follow it or anybody qualified can follow it. All right. That gets our job done in a predictable way. Okay. Again, like I said, some of the results that we've seen can cut hours from 75 to 38 hours a week in under 90 days. So again, starting with the most obvious and the most neglected, where are the bottlenecks? Where are the consistent problems that you're having to be the firefighter coming from? When we get back to that source, oftentimes that's where we want to start to systemize and smooth out that process. So again, some of the other areas is, and I see this quite a bit, all right, is trying to do it all, right? Again, Steve expanded into landscaping, lost focus of profits, and profits dropped. So taking that almighty jump, thinking that we're going to grow the business, okay, but not delegating, not thinking about our time, right? Just going all in on it and figuring you can outwork not having systems. Okay, that's a surefire way to find yourself in a uncomfortable position. And a lot of us, we tend to do this over and over again. I don't know if it's an addiction at a certain point. I know I probably could be guilty of that and enjoying the chaos, but not wanting to turn down anything, not wanting to lose an opportunity. This is often the kind of stuff that keeps us very stuck because we never get the time. There's never enough time to actually systemize. There's never an actual time for you to focus on the business, right? So over expansion equals more headaches and less quality. Okay. So again, growth is great. Expansion is great as long as it's under control and you've planned for it, right? Where I see most contractors fail miserably, all right, is moving into it before taking care of the foundation, the fundamental things, all right? So meaning that they were struggling at low volume and they weren't organized at a low volume. How do you think that's going to work out when you get more, right? Or thinking a person's going to come in and just solve all those problems for them. If I can just get to that, then I can hire someone to do all that. It doesn't work that way. I wish it did. So 47% of contractors who are overexpanded see profit declines. Okay. This would be especially scary if you don't know your numbers. All right. So again, if you're a contractor that's not doing job costing, isn't financially responsible for their business or doesn't understand their numbers, okay, expansion is not really in your best interest. All right. The losses go up and the profits go down and down. Okay. So anybody that's been on these calls knows that I absolutely love to implement quick wins. I want you guys to think again, how can I start to actually take action? How can I start to put this in at any level that I'm at? All right. So I challenge everybody here to take at least one or two of my quick wins. All right. They may seem oversimplified, but again, even larger companies can benefit from some of these quick wins. Delegate one admin task or automate. Okay. If you're at that scale or that stage, all right. Use a template for quotes or invoices. Again, this can be in your system. A lot of times we can, again, think about automation, delegation here. All right. If you're the only one invoicing, we got to really question how that's occurring. Okay. Another one, we want to block 2 hours for owner only work, no interruptions. Okay. This is super important and was one of the things that really helped me in my earlier years of being able to focus on the business. Okay. So again, I can remember getting up at 5 o'clock and between 5 and 8 was my time to get everything done for my business that was vitally important. Okay. Before the phone started ringing, before I had to deal with the guys and stuff like that, that was my time. And that was incredibly helpful, especially when I started to block my time and plan to put certain things I knew I had to get done. All right, that really changed a lot of things for me. And again, it was my first actual system in my business. All right, I pulled my calendar out, I blocked that time off. I didn't allow any distractions, and I focused on just getting a few key things done that I had pre-planned. That will independently be one of the most efficient things for your system if you're starting out. All right, even actually if you've grown, this is something that almost anybody can apply, right? So pick one and do it by Friday. So again, setting deadlines for yourself. All right. If you can even pick one of these things, and if it's going to be blocking out your time, just go put it in your calendar, right? And do something today or do something now, all right, that is going to have benefit later. All right. These are all very simple. Nobody here could, I don't think anybody here could be incapable of doing at least one of these things. So before I go any further, let's see. Anybody have any questions? If you do, throw them in the chat or feel free to unmute yourself. All right. We'll keep rolling here then. Out of curiosity, how many hours are you guys or did you guys work last week? In the chat, if you feel comfortable, throw in how many hours you worked last week. Was it 40, 50, 70, 36 and a half? Oh, there he is. That's a good number. I like that, Dan. Okay. How many of you guys, I'm out of curiosity here, wore how many hours you worked as a badge for a while? Was a sign of how tough you were or how much you could take compared to everybody else? I know I maybe just me, but there was a point at my career where I was always the guy that outworked everybody, and it got me nowhere. Actually, it was probably the biggest contributor to my divorce. Okay, so again, you want to think about it, especially if you have family, if you have people that you are responsible for beyond yourself. Again, you have to be accountable to this time. And me, myself, again, even at this stage, I am extremely picky of my time. All right. If it's not in my calendar, if it hasn't been something that I have segmented out, I'm not doing it. Full stop. So something has to be, and it has to pass a criteria to get into that calendar. Again, I've become extremely selfish with my time, all right, and very picky, all right. You have to pass a criteria. When you stop saying yes to everything, all right, or just assuming you can just work harder and get through it all right, when you learn the word no, all right, big things start to change in your business, all right, and in your life. Again, if your life is you don't have time for personal things and you're missing time with your family, you better believe that it's going to reflect in your business. Most people don't make that connection until it's too late. All right, putting everything you have and all your time into your business, even going over that 40-hour mark, all right, is almost surely a recipe for problems. Okay. And very rarely have I ever come across anybody working those kind of hours that were more productive than the person working 40 or 50. Okay. We actually start to decline cognitively, and that's where mistakes get made. You're only human. Nobody can cheat this. Okay. So again, let's think about our time. Where is it going? Okay. So I want to come back to this and get you guys really clear on how we can start to fix this first problem. So when we think about systems, when we think about improving our business, most of you guys and most of the conversations I have start with complex and difficult to implement systems. And I always try to slow people down, right? We want to talk about AI. We want to talk about automations. We want to talk about sophisticated project management systems built for companies that are 10 million. We even want to talk about things like jobbers, stuff like that. Guys, you know, what we fundamentally miss in all of that and the opportunity, all right, is if you can't do basic systemization, you have no business using those systems, all right? And they're not going to serve you, right? In most cases, and most of the situations we're seeing now, all right, somebody went out and got sold a CRM with an AI involved in it. I think I've had these conversations probably 4 times this week, right? They got an AI chatbot or a new voice call out thing, but it's done nothing for them. It's actually losing them sales, all right, because it wasn't set up for a system that they actually use or understand. Okay. And again, if you're not following the steps in those complex systems and those things aren't being completed, AI only speeds it up and makes it harder and gets things even more confused. And most of the people that are coming to us with these really backward systems are the guys that, again, they're late to all their appointments. They don't use a calendar, right? They don't know how to delegate, all right? They think that magically AI will just solve all these problems. It won't. And I'm using AI probably too much just because I've had that conversation multiple times this week, but it goes beyond that, right? When we work with contractors, 99% of the time they're working with us because they are in chaos, they're burnt out, right? They don't know what to do. They've tried so many different things, all right? And nothing's worked, or things work for a little while and then they fall apart. And a lot of times, what we have to do, all right, while we're building solid foundations around them, is get them to realize what starts with you, the owner. You're the example to your business, all right? If you want your staff to be more accountable, all right, to be more responsible, all right, start looking in your own backyard. How organized are you? Okay, do you know where your time is going? Do we know how to properly delegate? Okay. So when we think about delegation, I'm going to give you the key principles that we follow and that I swear by is first of all, you cannot delegate what you haven't documented. Okay. So you cannot delegate anything you have not documented. So there's a lot of gray area in all construction businesses, all contracting businesses. All right. And I know this firsthand because these are the kind of things that we do is look at a business and we document every square inch of it. All right. And the reason we do that is it flushes out all the gray area, all right? The places where people lose accountability. So think about when you've hired somebody, most of us probably are similar to me. I came up in the shut up and work era where you showed up and you did your job and someone taught you half-assed. I learned by screaming in air, right? And you just did your job and went home. There wasn't a lot of onboarding or training or anything. It was just survival of the fittest, survival by fire. Okay. That really doesn't work out in any other industry, and it's never really worked out here. So again, if we think about it and we're really honest about what's happened and why we have labor shortages and people are choosing not to get into the trades, it really is our own doing. How many of you guys make it easy for someone to do their job and remove the gray area, show them what winning looks like, right? Or do we just micromanage because that's all we know how to do? Give people tasks, and then wonder why they don't take accountability. Again, if I stood over your shoulder every day and told you what to do, all right, how would you feel about me? Would that be empowering? But without it being documented, you can't really hand it off to somebody, all right? If you don't have onboarding systems and stuff like that, you can't really be hands off. You have to be hands on. You have to micromanage because how else would they get the information? It's all in your head, right? And then what's in your head from day to day could change. And I see this quite often too. Anybody that's tried it, all right, it changes on a day to day or how you're feeling, right? So that's not a way to scale, all right? And then you're putting it all on people, all right, with no direction. So no wonder we get chaos. Okay. So again, if we can track your time, find the things in your time that shouldn't be there, right? Admin tasks, like just the very simple stuff, guys. All right. Then we want to just document. And when I say document, it's as simple as this. Pull your cell phone out and shoot a video. Shoot a 5-minute video. If it's cleaning out the truck, all right. If it's how to set up a piece of equipment, let's get over the fact of making things complex or having to be perfect. All right. I'll tell you the best ones that I have are very simple. Okay. I see something. All right. Even here at Contractor, I shoot a loom video. Here's how it's supposed to be. There's your documentation. The next person, you don't have to explain that again to. So again, if you find yourself explaining the same thing to people over and over again, all right, that's not a them problem. That's a you problem. Right? That's because we haven't documented. We haven't created something that's permanent that tells the person how to do the thing. Okay? Again, and assuming that people should just know this stuff, like somehow it magically just gets downloaded, that's ridiculous and often leads to the way they look at your business. You're not a prize at that point. You're just like everybody else. Okay? Only at that point can we systemize that one process. So again, to give you an easy thing to work on here, all right, let's find that one thing. If it's, like I said, cleaning out the truck, if it's adding inventory to the truck, cool. All right. We have AI as well. If you want to use it to help get your step by step, again, no real excuse, but most of this stuff can be done off your cell phone. Right? Nothing fancy, right? You know how it's supposed to be done, but now you'll never ever have to explain that again. And when someone asks, you send them the video. Or when somebody needs that, you send them the video. Okay? Not overly complicated there, right? Okay? Think checklists. Again, very easy. You add a checklist to that to make sure that they've done it. You've removed the gray area from things that you will not have to do again. You can delegate them off to somebody and start to get things off your plate. Okay? It doesn't have to be pretty. That's the other thing that I think people get stuck on is the idea that it has to be perfect, all right? That it should be at a certain level. Listen, that's not the way it works, right? Again, done is better than perfect. So get over the having to be perfect or polished, all right? Start thinking about practical. Start thinking about easy and taking these things off your plate, all right? They don't have to be perfect. Okay? So think about what at least one or two of these things could mean to your week, right? If you could get back 1 or 2 hours of your time every single week, all right, what benefit would that bring you? What could you do with that? Could you spend more time, I don't know, selling to a customer? Could you spend more time maybe finding other things that you can delegate? On the other hand, all right, continue to do what you're doing and don't address it, how long can you continue to do that for? And what's the consequences going to be? Are you just, again, adding more and more? Okay. So again, working 80 hours is not a badge of honor, all right? It's a sign to change. Even working 60 hours at this point, all right? Or doing things you don't like doing in your business, all right? Saying I've been doing this for 20 years, but absolutely hating the things that you're doing, all right? There's something that needs to be understood about that. Most of the time, all right, we have a couple of key areas where it's in our zone of genius. Maybe you're great at sales. Maybe you're great at technical, right? Doesn't really matter. You need to find the things that are in your zone of genius and that you enjoy doing in your business, all right? And then look to get rid of everything else. Okay? So again, out of a show of hands here, is anybody once in this room woke up and thought to themselves, I've got a whole bunch of data entry to do today. And I'm going to sit in a dark room and I'm going to have a blast doing that. I'm really pumped about that. Is anybody here? No? Hell no, not a chance. Or I ever thought about, oh boy, you know what? I have a whole day to myself and I'm going to do my bookkeeping and accounting. Maybe some of you have. I don't know. Okay. So think about that in context. That we all know that's super important to get done, right? We all know that's something that is necessary for our business to be successful. But then we try to put it on ourselves as if we're going to magically wake up one day and have this thought, right? It doesn't make sense. So again, the idea here is to identify those things, all right? You still got to own them. They still need to be done, all right? But get them away from you and get them into the person that actually has those thoughts and actually does those things on a day-to-day basis. Get them away where it's their zone of genius, okay? As long as you have, again, thought about it, documented it, all right, you are now free to delegate it completely off. And then if we want to take it to the next level, all right, for most of us, we micromanage, all right, because we're afraid of losing control, all right? We're afraid of somebody not doing something right. We're afraid of it costing us, all right? And what this really is an indication of, all right, is we have no way to measure, okay? So the last part of this is, again, we have to document to delegate, but we also have to, if you want to be able to manage, you need to be able to measure, right? A good manager measures everything, right? So again, how do we measure these things? How do we know somebody's doing a really great job? It's just as simple as what I just shared with you, right? Before we get into complex dashboards and financials and all types of things that are required in a large scale business, the first thing I would measure, again, your time, right? Can you measure your time and how much time you spent in your business? Okay. Can you be responsible for understanding where your time is going? If you were to measure that again and did a time audit, right, and kept track on that, you would very quickly see the benefits of it. All right. But when we don't measure, all right, it's easy to go back into bad habits because we never seen the results. Okay. Same thing goes with our team. All right. If you're having performance issues, I always laugh at this, and I laugh at it because I made the mistake for so long without realizing it. But all of us expect everybody at a certain point to come in and have the same type of skill that we brought to the job. All right. Maybe you're the Wayne Gretzky of your trade. I know I was pretty good back in my day, probably not as good as I think actually was. In my head, I was the best there ever was. When an ironic thing happens there, right? The reason you probably started your own business and the reason you're got into running a business and was because you worked for somebody where it was a dead end, right? Or somebody that didn't treat you well, right? Somebody that when you looked at them, you thought to yourself, I could do this better than they could. Okay, why do you think that happens? Think about it for a quick second, right? So ultimately, are we giving employees like a pathway? Are we able to measure whether they did a great job or did a terrible job? So again, think about bringing somebody into your business and everything. You wouldn't be able to tell them if they crushed it or if they did a shit job, right? What are you going to get from that? You're going to get a mediocre at best. Even if you had an A player, you're going to get B performance. All right. It's very easy to understand. Okay. So things like not tracking hours or budgets on a job. All right. I don't know. It takes whatever. Okay. Not having a budget, not being able to show their team what good looks like, not tracking customer satisfaction, not tracking easy things that you can accumulate. And again, do you need complex systems for that? No. Okay. But you have to have a way to know if you're winning or not. And especially when you start to bring staff in, the worst thing you can do is put them in an environment, all right, where there is no example of winning. It's just go and do the same thing every single day. All right. And that's probably why you stop working for whoever you stopped working for when you decided to start your own business. All right. There was no benefit. There was no pathway or opportunity for you to move up. All right. No way to demonstrate your value. All right. And then here we are doing the exact same thing and wondering why we can't find good guys. So these are very common things, and it all ultimately comes back to it. The last point I'm going to make, I know I've talked a lot here. Hopefully you guys are taking in some of these things and thinking about what kind of actions you can take. All right. But let's think about other key areas in the business that would improve. All right. And as you get bigger and as you start to scale without measuring, without having job costing, without knowing exactly where you stand, how do you expect improvement? Do you think it just comes magically? Right? You want to make more money? Cool. All right. What are you measuring? How are you like, how would you know if, something's improved or gotten worse? If the answer is you don't know and you have no way to measure that, then that's a absolute clear indication of failing systems. Okay? And again, I only deal with this day in and day out, right? And I can very quickly usually tell whether a contractor is on the right path for systems. And again, what we see the most of is just over complexed or hard to follow processes that are in place that don't really serve the owner or serve the contractor. Okay? So I want you to think about what things you can easily measure. All right. I want you to think about what's things you need to document. Okay. And how you can make that simple if you're not at the higher scale. Now, if you have project managements and multiple staff, again, it might be time to book a call with us. We specialize in building systems for contractors. We specialize in helping to get clarity in your business. We try to make things as easy as possible. We are a consultant, so I'm not going to coach you. All right. This is an example, by the way, of coaching. I hope you guys got some good ideas, but a consultant, just for clarity, a consultant that comes in and actually does the work. All right. So again, most of us, we don't need more information. We need somebody that will partner with them to actually just fix the problems. If that seems like something that could be helpful to you, all right, feel free to reach out. Happy to take a look at the problems you're struggling with and at least give you the next few steps and how you can do it or how you can work with us to solve those problems. But ultimately, it's about taking action, right? I don't want to, again, underestimate how much importance is in taking imperfect action today, whatever that may be. Okay. Being a consultant, if you could take one step today, all right, then it potentially becomes the catalyst and the momentum that you need to take the next one tomorrow. Okay. Start with small, start with easy. Don't worry about perfection. Anybody have any questions? Anything that they want to discuss? I would love to have a chat if you have anything at all that you have on your mind. I'm here for you. Oh, okay. Yeah, either throw it in the chat or feel free to unmute yourself there, guys. Okay. Making it easy for me then.
No, sorry, I was just gonna say I feel like you're spot on with it. Like the biggest thing, big takeaway from that as well is like working so many hours and thinking that you're doing more. There's
Right.
no, I try and hold fast to 40 hours a week
Hmm.
most, and I am way more productive than I ever was working 60 or 70 hours a week.
Totally. And again, it's taking that 40 hours and just focusing on the things that bring the biggest results to the business. I work with you, so I know like we focused on sales, we focused on and getting rid of all of the other things that A, you didn't like doing.
Yeah.
it wasn't giving you energy, and that we could put a dollar figure to that just didn't make sense. So if we're doing sales and we're in front of customers, right, we're closing deals, whether you like it or not, that's many thousands of dollars an hour. Or
Yeah.
you're on your job sites where even if you're the best at it, the best there ever was, and you probably were, right? The Wayne Gretzky of project management, right? There's still an hourly rate to that. There's still a fundamental cost that you can't break through. So if you're doing that $50 an hour thing and it's consuming your time, all right, that's where you're trapped. That is the actual trap that you're misunderstanding. And a lot of us confuse that and we get comfortable, right? We think that's how, we can be safe. And unfortunately, it's nothing more than a trap, right? Once we step outside of that and we learn how to make small steps if you're just starting out, or again, finding these roadblocks, you'll see dramatic changes, and you've definitely seen them, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
even in how you see yourself and how you spend your time, but it's discipline, right? It's recognizing these things. It's doing the steps to get these things off your plate. All right. And it doesn't have to be complicated, right? It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be overwhelming. If you don't want to use tech, don't use tech. I don't care, right? And I'm a consultant that brings tech to the table, but it again, don't put roadblocks in your way and make excuses for yourself of why you can't get unstuck.
100%. And even then, it works into your personal life as well. Like it
Uh,
makes you have a much happier personal life, and then in turn, you have a happier business life. And
And I was mentioning that before, like most of the time, all right, when we're working with contractors, we get to know them pretty intimately. If their life is like, if they're having problems in their personal life, it's obvious in the business. All right. Usually that's the fuse we think is where it is. But listen, if you're not taking care of yourself, if you're not enjoying relationships outside of work, all right, that business isn't going to grow. You're not going to ever get beyond where you're at. And it's just a matter of fact. Like it takes momentum, it takes being in a state of present, right? And most of us, I would say the majority of contractors we work with are stuck in a state of anxiety where they're six gear pinned all the time, all right? And they wonder why they feel stuck, all right? Again, until we can get back to a state of present, by the way, present is where life happens, right? That's where new and creative things can happen. It's where we feel motivated to take to action and to make change. All right. We feel motivated to create habits. You can't do that in anxiety. All right. And then polar opposite to that, depression, right? Where we're just depressed about all the shitty decisions we continuously make and know to do better. So that's not a productive place to be in either. All right. So again, don't think you can cheat this and give up your entire free time to your business, because if there's anything I've learned in all my years of trial and error in this area is you can love your business all you want. You can love it to death, right? It'll never love you back. All right. So once you realize that, and once you start to become incredibly selfish with your time, all right, everything else will start to make sense. Okay. The boogeyman will suddenly not be there, right? All the things that we're afraid of are actually the things keeping us stuck. And it's ridiculous, right? If you think you need to work 80 hours or, anything more than 40, then it's not a passing thing. It means that we have to focus on the systems and start to do something differently to get back our time. Cool. I certainly appreciate everybody that dropped in and hung out with us. Again, if you're looking for any help, some clarity, happy to jump on a call and discuss those things with you. We are a consultant. We help to build contracting businesses out, help to get back free time. I'll throw my link in the chat there. Feel free to book a call. Okay. And beyond that, again, guys, if you take nothing else, do one thing, just one thing today. All right. And who knows, maybe it'll lead to another thing tomorrow. All right. So take some imperfect action for me today. All right. And hope you got some value. Everyone have a wonderful day.